Hello, this is Brian Rowe with Mythic MTG Tech number 55, looking at the top 10 legacy defining cards. Now, as I talk about legacy defining cards, these are the cards that you really need to be aware of, and you need to specifically plan for in your deck. You have to have ways to beat them or be prepared for them. Nobody wants to get caught off guard by these cards. Each of these cards are also cards that you could easily do a whole video on, so I'm going to be packing a lot of content here into the next 10 minutes. Before we get in, there's a few things I'm not going to talk about. I'm not going to cover how mana is perfect. Mana is an amazing thing in Legacy because you have the dual lands and you have the fetch land, so it's extremely easy to play 2 colors, splash a color, play 3 colors, even play 4 color decks. But that's usually not going to lose you a game. Although I would definitely be aware of Stifle, and learning how to play around Stifle with fetch lands is extremely important. Also learning the synergy between Brainstorm and fetch lands is very important. The honorable mentions to this list is really long. Now, these are things that see a lot of play in Legacy. Some of these are upcoming powerful cards, and others are really enablers. Sensei's Divining Top, Brainstorm, and Ponder all fall into the enabler category because they improve your card selection so much. These type of cards have been pulled from Modern and make Modern a much more difficult format where assembling a combination is much more difficult in Modern than it is in Legacy because these cards are missing. Hymn-to-Truck has that double black requirement, so it doesn't see a huge amount of play, although it's an amazing card and something you should be prepared for is that massive discard. Lingering Souls, Tom Martell might put on the top of the list. I think this is one of the easier cards to deal with, although it is definitely seeing a pretty good amount of play, and it's an up-and-comer. Cavern of Souls doesn't actually see a lot of play in Legacy, and I'm kind of shocked because it is an amazingly good card. It enables a lot of decks. Punishing Fire is just starting to come around, and Liliana of the Veil is also just starting to come into being and could have easily made higher places on this list. Okay, I have trouble keeping myself to 10, so I've got 11 on this list. Aether Vial. This card is amazing. It looks like, at first, that you're actually slowing yourself down. You're spending 1 mana on turn 1, but what that does, it gives you a return of an extra mana each turn to where 3 turns later you're actually 3 or 4 mana ahead. This card is amazing. It is really what makes Merfolk and Goblins super competitive in the Legacy environment, and realizing that your opponent may be able to win an entire game off of only casting 1 spell. Aether Vial is extremely important. As a control player, you need to have a way to deal with a resolved Aether Vial, or you're just going to lose the game. You can't just counter everything. There are several answers out there. I really like Ancient Grudge as a sideboard option. Abrupt Decay is also extremely good because it stops your Force of Wills from protecting the Aether Vial. It's a lovely answer, but it is something you really need to be prepared for. In the number 10 spot here, we have Thoughtseize. Hymn-to-Truck is also getting a lot of notice in this area, but it's targeted removal from your opponent's hand. The ability to hit yourself for 2 life, but then take the best card for your opponent's combo is extremely powerful. This is one of the best disruption spells out there. My 2 favorite ways to play against it is Leyline of Sanctity, which is actually not even bad main decking in some decks, or a very aggressive deck that includes Lightning Bolts, because if your opponent is fetching and Thoughtseizing on turn 1, and they're pulling things out of your hand that are really doing 3 to 5 damage to them, they're basically losing a card and their life is already down. So an aggro strategy does very well against these Thoughtseize type strategies. Another potential answer for this is Brainstorm, because you're able to put the good stuff back on top of your deck. In the number 9 spot here, we've got Delver of Secrets and Tarmoogoyf. Now, I know I cheated again, I put 2 cards here, but it's really understanding how the tempo strategies work that is so important. Tempo strategies put 1 threat into play and then do everything they possibly can to keep that 1 threat going. Delver of Secrets is basically a flying lightning bolt in blue. I'm not sure what R&D was thinking when they let this monster out, but he is incredible. And Tarmoogoyf is up to a 6/7 for 2 casting costs. These are ideal threats. The 2 big cards that I really like for stopping these currently is Baleful Strix, because you put a flyer into play, you also draw a card, and Death Touch stops both of these, and Abrupt Decay. And I think Abrupt Decay is actually the stronger one here because of the cannot be countered ability. It shuts down those tempo decks, and it is my favorite card right now in Bug for beating up on Rug. Abrupt Decay, something you definitely need to be prepared for. Abrupt Decay works extremely well with both Shardless Agent and Snapcaster Mage. This has severely impacted those hard control decks that are out there and some of the smaller casting cost decks. My favorite answers to this card currently are Mother of Runes, which I know is not seeing much play right now in Legacy because of the prominence of combo decks, but it is just incredible because Mother of Runes can actually stop Abrupt Decay and allow you to get through a significant amount of damage. Now, if you want to see a deck that really uses Mother of Runes effectively, think about taking the Maverick decks and adding a little bit of black so that you can splash things like Dark Confidant or Abrupt Decay, and you have a really nice, powerful combination in the current metagame. Divert is also one that I have yet to see someone prepare for, and it can blow somebody out. I love this as a one-of in your tempo style decks. They go for your Delver of Secrets or your Tarmoogoyf, and you blow out one of their creatures. Wonderfully powerful card. I love it. The number 7 spot here is one that may quickly move up to the number 2 or number 3 spot over time, Deathrite Shaman. This is an amazing card. The ability to main deck Graveyard Hate makes Reanimator strategies have to have the nuts or lose to you. It is an incredible card. The acceleration allowing you directly into a second turn Liliana or Geist is nice. Gaining life stops or slows down those burn strategies, and doing some extra damage really gives an incredible punch to this guy. He's an amazing creature. At a 1/2, you've really got to have answers in your deck that deal with 2 toughness. Punishing Fire is definitely one of the best ones out there right now. Grim Lava Mancher is a nice honorable mention. I even see decks main decking Rest in Peace as part of a combo with the idea of shutting down Deathrites and Tarmoogoyfs. And the number 6 spot here is the favorite win condition of control players, Jace the Mind Sculptor, the Planeswalker that puts your opponents to sleep by slowly grinding you out with massive card advantage. I mean, I love playing this guy. He is incredible, he's very powerful, and he's very tough to deal with. My 2 favorite answers for him right now, besides just killing someone before they get to 4 mana, is Chains of Mephistopheles, because this shuts down Brainstorms, and it shuts down Jace the Mind Sculptor. That draw 2 cards and put back 3 ability actually turns into a draw to discard to put back 2. It's just incredible. It stops usually 4 to 8 cards in a blue control deck. Bloodbraid Elf is also a really nice one. Haste allows you to jump in and hit Jace really quickly, and Cascade keeps you on top of the card advantage. You need to be able to take out Jace and generate card advantage if you're going to deal with those blue control decks. Number 5 spot here really got cheating out permanents. For a long time, it used to be Natural Order that was the most popular one in this spot, where you natural order something like a Dryad Arbor into a Progenitus. Right now, though, it's Show and Tell. For 1 less mana in the ever-popular color of blue, you're able to blow people out by skipping directly up to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or 15 mana on the mana curve scale. You must have answers for Show and Tell if you're going to currently play in Legacy. My favorite being Liliana the Veil or Gilded Drake. I love making my opponents sack their creatures or switch for their creatures. Sword of Temptation is also a really nice one. Now, some of the Show and Tell decks I know put permanents into play, such as Omniscience. So being able to deal with enchantments is also very important when dealing with Show and Tell. But You need to realize when playing Legacy that people are going to skip over the mana curve entirely and jump to 6+ very quickly, and you must have an answer to deal with it. The number 4 spot here, I've got Stoneforge Mystic, and this guy's power to shut down aggro decks is just incredible. Being able to drop on turn 1, or usually on turn 2, a Stoneforge Mystic allows you to get Batterskull or Jute, and Jute shuts down all the creature decks, and Batterskull shuts down the aggressive, burn-you-out decks. Now, there's several different answers to this. One, I really like Ancient Grudge. Just being able to get rid of that equipment is great. Sulfur Vortex is also extremely good, stopping your opponent from gaining life. But the current favorite right now is one of the earlier cards on this list, Thoughtseize. Because after they play a Stoneforge Mystic, you remove the card that they went and got from their hand. So be prepared for this type of equipment, getting cheated in early, especially if you're playing one of those aggressive burn strategies. The number 3 spot here, I've got Lion's Eye Diamond. And it's not just the Lion's Eye Diamond, it's those enablers that create the possibility of first and second turn kills. Now, if there's anything on this list that I'd like to see banned, it's definitely Lion's Eye Diamond, because it takes the fun out of playing the game and really limits the amount of decks that are viable when you have decks out there that can win on turn 1. And yes, I know you can just bring a bunch of sideboard hate, but then it opens you up to the rest of the field. I like seeing an interactive game that at least goes 3, 4, 5 turns, and if you're going to play Legacy, you must be prepared for your opponent to drop his whole hand on the first or second turn and combo out with something like Goblin Charbelcher or Tendrils of Agony. The current popular ways to deal with this is definitely Force of Will and Thoughtseize. Thoughtseize is the proactive way, because you look at your opponent's hand on turn 1 and pull out the best part of their combo and then beat them down over the next few turns. Force of Will is the reactive control. It definitely costs you a card advantage because you're 2 for 1-ing things and can be stopped by things like Silence. But it's definitely a staple that's out there, and I definitely recommend it in sideboards, if not in main decks, if you're playing blue. In the number 2 spot, not surprisingly, we have Force of Will. Force of Will has been a defining card in Legacy ever since Legacy was created, back when I would call it Type 1.5 or Extended. Force of Will is what allows control decks to exist and keeps the unfair decks in place. Now, Wizards have definitely added several cards recently that make Force of Will less desirable. Cards like Abrupt Decay that can get around it, or Bloodbraid Elf, where you can either counter the 3/2 or the item they're cascading into, is really a tough choice. Shardless Agent is another wonderful example. When the blue player is having to pitch 2 cards to stop half of a card, you can get around Force of Will with that massive card advantage. Hymn to Turok is also another one of my favorite old answers to Force of Will. In the number 1 spot here, we've got Wastelands. Wastelands really change the dynamics of the game. I highly recommend adding at least 1 basic land to each of your decks. Nothing feels worse than getting blown out by Wastelands. Wastelands also bring down the curve of all of Legacy. People have to be able to respond to losing their land in their multicolored decks. Deathrite Shaman is a wonderful current answer to Wastelands, and they even increase the value of your own Wasteland. So you Deathrite Shaman turn 1, turn 2, if you get Wastelanded, you're actually not back. You're at 2 mana at that point, and there's at least 2 lands sitting in the graveyard. For those decks that really need their land and are playing non-basics, I highly recommend Pithing Needle. I've been playing 12 Post recently, and Pithing Needle's main deck shut down Wastelands and also shut down several other cards on this list, such as Jace and Liliana. So they've got a lot of extra value to them. And Ether Vial's also another great way to get around Wastelands. If you drop an Ether Vial first turn, you're going to be hitting that virtual land drop every turn and curving out, so you don't really have to worry about the loss. So whenever you are getting ready to play Legacy, throw together a burn deck, throw 4 proxy Wastelands into it, and play against that so that you can kind of get a baseline of where Legacy starts and what you need to be prepared for. Because if you can't make it around a 4 Wasteland burn deck, you're never going to make it in Legacy. Last piece of bonus tech here. These are 2 cards that are incredibly powerful and underplayed currently in Legacy. Because of Wastelands, the average casting cost is so low in Legacy. You see some decks with a 1.5 or just barely above 1 for their average casting cost. Chalice of the Void can shut down entire decks. I've seen decks main deck Chalice of the Void and just get free wins out of it by jumping to the 2 casting costs with their own cards and shutting off their opponent entirely. Also, Snapcaster Mage is an amazing card. It does take a little bit more mana on the board, so you've got to play at least a basic or 2 so that you get up to 2 or 3 land. But once you get to that point, you start to win counter wars, you start to take out your opponent's threats in mass. I love Snapcaster Mage, but he's being underplayed right now instead of maybe Esper. So both of these I highly recommend looking at if you're looking at breaking into Legacy and trying to find a new deck of your own. Find something that uses these cards to your advantage. Thanks. This has been Brian Rowe with Mythic MTG Tech, looking at legacy-defining staples.
Red rum.